The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of amber and crimson, as the last train of the day pulled into Willow Creek, Colorado on a brisk autumn evening in 1878. The small frontier town, nestled between rolling hills and the meandering Silver River, grew still as the locomotive's whistle pierced the air one final time before steam hissed from its metal flanks. Among the few passengers disembarking were 3 women, their rounded bellies visible beneath travel-worn dresses, standing abandoned and bewildered as the train pulled away, leaving them stranded in a town where they knew no one and no one was waiting for them. Elijah Holbrook watched the scene unfold from the saddle of his chestnut stallion. At 32, he'd seen plenty in his years working cattle across the Colorado Territory, but the sight of 3 pregnant women left alone as dusk approached stirred something in him he couldn't ignore. He nudged his horse forward, the leather of his saddle creaking beneath him as he approached the platform where the women huddled together against the growing chill. "Evening, ladies," he said, tipping his hat respectfully. "Appears you might be in need of some assistance." The tallest of the 3 women stepped forward, her auburn hair escaping from beneath a modest bonnet, her green eyes revealing a mixture of wariness and determination. "We're waiting for someone," she said, her voice steady despite the obvious lie. Elijah nodded, noting how the other 2 women, one with honey blonde hair and the other dark-haired with olive skin, exchanged worried glances. "Station's closing soon," he said gently. "And Willow Creek doesn't have a hotel. Nearest boarding house is in Red Valley, 20 miles east. Our husbands will be coming," said the auburn-haired woman, though her voice wavered. "I see," Elijah replied, not pressing the obvious falsehood. He dismounted, keeping a respectful distance. "Name's Elijah Holbrook. I run cattle on land about 3 miles north of here. I'd be happy to help you ladies find proper accommodations until your husbands arrive." The blonde woman broke into tears, her shoulders shaking as she covered her face with her gloved hands. The dark-haired woman put an arm around her while fixing Elijah with a distrustful stare. "We don't need charity from strangers," the auburn-haired woman said firmly. "It's not charity, madam," Elijah replied. "Just common decency. Night gets mighty cold out here, and I suspect your situation isn't exactly as you've described." The station master emerged, locking the door behind him. "Station's closed, folks. You'll have to move along." The auburn-haired woman's composure finally cracked. "Please," she whispered to Elijah, her voice barely audible. "We have nowhere to go." Elijah's weathered face softened. "My ranch has room enough. I've got a cabin that's separate from the main house, clean and proper. You can stay there while you figure things out." The 3 women conferred in whispers, desperation finally overcoming caution. The auburn-haired woman turned back to him. "I'm Abigail Cooper," she said. "These are my friends, Lillian Parker and Sophia Martinez." "Pleased to meet you, ladies," Elijah said. "I've got a wagon parked behind the feed store. Let me fetch it and we'll get you somewhere safe before nightfall." As Elijah walked away, Abigail turned to her companions. "We don't have many options," she said quietly. Sophia, the dark-haired woman, nodded grimly. "At least he seems decent enough. Better than sleeping at the station or accepting Walter Gibson's offer back in Denver." Lillian wiped her tears. "Do you think he's telling the truth about having a separate cabin?" "We'll find out soon enough," Abigail replied, resting a protective hand on her 7-month pregnancy. "And if he's not, well, we still have the Derringer." 15 minutes later, Elijah returned with a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 draft horses. He helped each woman up onto the wagon bench, treating them with careful respect, before loading their modest luggage in the back. As they traveled the rutted dirt road leading out of town, Elijah kept conversation light, pointing out landmarks and speaking of the coming winter. The women remained guarded, offering only minimal responses. "If you don't mind me asking," he said as they crossed a wooden bridge spanning a creek, "where were you ladies heading?" After a long pause, Abigail answered, "San Francisco. We had arrangements." Elijah nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. 3 unmarried pregnant women traveling alone. They'd been sent away, most likely, to have their babies far from judging eyes, perhaps at one of those homes for unfortunate women. "California's still there," he said simply. "No need to rush the journey if you need time to rest." As they crested a hill, Elijah's ranch came into view, a sprawling property with a sturdy main house, barn, corral, and several outbuildings. A smaller cabin stood about 100 yards from the main house, smoke curling from its chimney. "My foreman must have lit a fire in the cabin," Elijah explained. "I sent word ahead with a ranch hand who passed us on the road." "You have many workers?" Sophia asked, the first words she'd spoken directly to him. "4 hands who help with the cattle, plus Hank, my foreman." "Good men, all of them. They bunk in the quarters behind the barn. The cabin where you'll stay is private." The wagon rolled up to the cabin, and Elijah helped each woman down before retrieving their bags. The cabin was simple but clean, with a main room containing a cookstove, table, and chairs, plus 2 small bedrooms. "It's not fancy," Elijah said, "but it's warm and dry. Stove stocked with wood. There's fresh water in the barrel, and I had Hank bring over some provisions." He gestured to a basket on the table containing bread, cheese, dried fruit, and bacon. The women looked around in cautious relief. "This is very kind of you, Mr. Holbrook," Abigail said. "Elijah, please, and it's nothing any decent person wouldn't do." He moved toward the door. "I'll leave you ladies to settle in. If you need anything, main house is just up the path. Breakfast is at sunup, but no obligation to join. I can have food brought over." After he left, the 3 women sat at the table, the reality of their situation sinking in. "What do we do now?" Lillian asked, absently stroking her 6-month pregnant belly. Abigail sighed, the weight of leadership heavy on her shoulders. "We rest, gather our strength, then figure out what comes next." Sophia broke a piece of bread, her practical nature asserting itself. "At least we have shelter for tonight. And maybe tomorrow we can learn if this cowboy truly is as decent as he seems." "Men are rarely what they seem," Lillian said bitterly, thinking of the charming railroad executive who'd promised her marriage only to disappear when she told him of the baby. Abigail reached for her friend's hands. "We have each other, and for now, that has to be enough." As darkness settled over the Colorado countryside, Elijah sat on his porch, smoking a pipe and wondering about the 3 women fate had brought to his door. 5 years, a widower, he'd grown accustomed to solitude, but something about their arrival stirred memories of a fuller house, of voices and laughter that had long been absent from his life. Morning came with frost on the ground, and the women awakened to the sounds of a working ranch cattle lowing in the distance, men calling to each other, the rhythmic chopping of wood. Abigail was first to rise, stoking the fire in the stove and putting on water for coffee from the supplies Elijah had provided. A knock at the door revealed a young ranch hand, hat in hand. "Mr. Holbrook sends his regards, madam. Says breakfast is ready whenever you ladies are, or I can bring food here if you prefer." Abigail considered for a moment. "Tell Mr. Holbrook we'll join him shortly, and thank you." When she closed the door, she found Sophia watching her. "Are you sure that's wise?" the dark-haired woman asked. "We need to understand our situation better," Abigail replied. "And we can't hide in here forever." 30 minutes later, the 3 women made their way to the main house, where they found Elijah setting a large table with plates of eggs, biscuits, bacon, and steaming coffee. "Good morning, ladies," he said warmly. "Please make yourselves comfortable." Throughout breakfast, Elijah was the perfect host, ensuring they had everything they needed without pressing for information about their circumstances. The meal was nearly finished when Abigail finally broached the subject they'd been avoiding. "Mr. Holbrook, Elijah, we're grateful for your hospitality, but we need to be clear about our situation." "No need to explain anything you don't want to," he replied. "There's plenty need," she continued firmly. "We're unmarried women expecting children. We were traveling to a home in California that takes in women in our condition. But the man who was supposed to escort us abandoned us at the station yesterday after taking what money we had left." Elijah's expression darkened. "What was his name? Does it matter?" Sophia asked. "It might if he's still in the area causing trouble for others." "James Weller," Lillian supplied. "He claimed to be a representative of the home sent to escort us safely." Elijah nodded, filing away the information. "Well, you're welcome to stay here until you decide your next steps. The cabin is yours for as long as you need it." "We can't accept charity indefinitely," Abigail protested. "We need to work to earn our keep." A ghost of a smile crossed Elijah's face. "As it happens, I've been meaning to bring some order to my accounts and correspondence. My wife used to handle such things before she passed, and I've made a proper mess of it since. Any of you ladies have experience with figures and letters?" Abigail and Sophia exchanged glances. "I worked as a schoolteacher in St. Louis," Abigail said, "and I kept books for my father's mercantile in Santa Fe," added Sophia. "Perfect," Elijah said. "And the garden's been neglected something terrible. My mother would turn in her grave if she could see the state of it." Lillian brightened. "I grew up on a farm in Iowa. I know quite a bit about growing things." "Then it seems we might help each other," Elijah concluded. "You ladies need a safe place, and I need help with tasks I've been neglecting. Fair wage for fair work." The arrangement was settled, and over the following weeks, a routine developed. Abigail took over Elijah's disastrous ledgers and correspondence, working from a small desk in the corner of his study. Sophia, despite being 8 months pregnant, proved remarkably efficient at organizing the ranch's supplies and scheduling. Lillian, though limited by her condition, began planning the resurrection of the garden come spring, while helping with meal preparation alongside Rosa, the middle-aged Mexican woman who cooked and cleaned for the ranch. November turned to December, and as Christmas approached, the initial wariness between Elijah and the women gradually dissolved. The ranch hands, initially awkward around the pregnant women, became protective, treating them with a respectful deference that touched Abigail deeply. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Elijah found Abigail alone in his study, working by lamplight on his correspondence. "You should rest," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "The letters can wait until tomorrow." Abigail looked up, brushing a strand of auburn hair from her face. "I'm nearly finished. Senator Collins needs this response about water rights before he leaves for Washington." Elijah smiled, impressed by how quickly she'd grasped the complexities of ranch business. "You're remarkable, you know that," a blush colored her cheeks. "Hardly. I'm just doing the job you're paying me for. It's more than that." He entered the room, taking a seat across from her. "You've brought order to chaos here. All 3 of you have." "We're grateful for the opportunity," she said, setting down her pen. "And for your discretion about our circumstances." "Your circumstances are your own business," he replied. "Though I admit to some curiosity about your story, not that you need to share it." Abigail was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the warm glow of the lamp. Something about his steady presence, His unwavering respect made her want to unburden herself. "I was engaged to the son of a prominent family in St. Louis," she began softly. "Andrew seemed everything I could want: educated, charming, from a good family. When I discovered I was expecting, I went to him in private, believing he would simply move our wedding date forward." Her laugh was hollow. "Instead, he denied the child was his, called me terrible names, and threatened to ruin my reputation if I tried to claim otherwise." Elijah's jaw tightened. "The coward! His family was influential. My position at the school was immediately terminated. My own parents—" Her voice caught. "They gave me money for the home in California and said not to return." She looked up, meeting his gaze. Lillian and Sophia had similar stories. "We met at a way station in Kansas City, all headed to the same place." "And now you're here," Elijah said quietly. "Now we're here," she agreed. "Though I'm not sure for how much longer. Sophia's time is coming soon." Elijah leaned forward. "I've been thinking about that. The nearest doctor is in Red Valley, and in winter those roads can be impassable. I've sent for a midwife, Mrs. Blackwell, from town. She's delivered half the babies in the county. She'll stay here until all three of you have your little ones." Abigail's eyes widened. "You've thought of everything." "Hardly," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "But I aim to do right by you ladies." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the cabin. Moments later, Lillian burst through the door, her blonde hair flying wild around her face. "It's Sophia," she cried. "The baby's coming." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Without the midwife yet arrived, Rosa took charge, having delivered many babies in her time. Elijah sent a ranch hand galloping toward town to hurry Mrs. Blackwell while he boiled water and gathered clean linens as directed. Abigail stayed by Sophia's side, wiping her brow and holding her hand through contractions that came with increasing frequency. Lillian prepared the bedroom, laying down waterproof sheets and gathering what supplies they had. "I'm scared," Sophia whispered between pains. "It's too early." "What if something's wrong?" "Everything will be fine," Abigail assured her with more confidence than she felt. "Rosa knows what she's doing, and the midwife is on her way." Outside the bedroom door, Elijah paced nervously, wincing at each cry of pain from within. The sound transported him back 5 years to the night he lost both his wife and newborn son. The memory was almost unbearable, yet he couldn't leave, couldn't abandon these women who had come to matter so much to him in such a short time. Mrs. Blackwell arrived 2 hours later, a stout, no-nonsense woman who took command of the situation immediately. She shooed Elijah away, telling him men were useless in birthing rooms, and set about examining Sophia. "Baby's positioned well," she announced, "and despite being early, seems a good size. We'll have this little one here before midnight. Mark my words." True to her prediction, as the grandfather clock in Elijah's sitting room struck 11, a new cry joined Sophia's, the indignant wail of a newborn taking their first breath. Elijah, who had retreated to the porch with a bottle of whiskey, stood immediately, the liquor forgotten. The bedroom door opened and Abigail appeared, her face tired but radiant. "It's a boy," she said. "Small but strong. Sophia's asking for you." Surprised, Elijah followed her into the bedroom, where Sophia sat propped against pillows, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft flannel. Her dark hair was damp with sweat, but her face glowed with an expression. Elijah recognized the transformative wonder of new motherhood. "Mr. Holbrook," she said softly, "I wanted to thank you. Without your kindness, I don't know where we would be tonight." Elijah cleared his throat, emotion making it difficult to speak. "No thanks needed, Miss Martinez. I'm just glad you're both well." Sophia looked down at her son. "I've decided to name him Miguel after my father, and I'd like his middle name to be Elijah if you'll permit it." The simple gesture struck Elijah deeply. "I'd be honored," he managed to say. Later, as Mrs. Blackwell settled in to stay the night and monitor mother and child, Elijah found himself alone with Abigail on the porch. The night was clear and cold, stars blazing overhead in the vast Colorado sky. "It's a miracle," Abigail said softly. "After everything, to bring new life into the world." "Yes," Elijah agreed, watching her profile in the moonlight. "A miracle indeed." Something had shifted between them that night. As December progressed and Christmas approached, Elijah found himself seeking Abigail's company more and more. Their conversations, once limited to ranch business, expanded to include books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they'd once held. He learned she was 26, educated at a women's seminary in Boston, and had traveled to St. Louis seeking independence from her controlling parents in Philadelphia. For her part, Abigail discovered that beneath Elijah's rugged exterior lay a thoughtful, well-read man who quoted Shakespeare as easily as he discussed cattle breeding. She learned about his wife, Sarah, who died in childbirth, and how he'd thrown himself into expanding the ranch afterward, working to exhaustion to outrun his grief. Christmas Eve arrived with a fresh blanket of snow. Elijah insisted on celebrating properly, and the main house was transformed with pine boughs, red ribbons, and candles. Sophia, recovering well with baby Miguel thriving, joined the festivities, as did the ranch hands and Rosa. Elijah had secretly arranged gifts: a silver rattle for Miguel, soft yarn and knitting needles for Sophia, who had expressed interest in learning, gardening books and seed packets for Lillian, and for Abigail, a leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover. "For your thoughts," he explained when she opened it. "You mentioned your old one was almost full." The gift touched her deeply, not for its cost, but because he had listened, had noticed something so personal about her habits. The women had prepared gifts as well: fresh baked cookies for the ranch hands, a knitted scarf for Rosa, and for Elijah, a meticulously organized set of ranch ledgers bound in leather, with projections for the coming year that showed impressive potential profits if his planned expansions proceeded. "This is remarkable," he said, paging through the neat columns of figures. "You've made sense of years of my scribbling." "We worked together on it," Abigail said, including Sophia and Lillian in the credit. "It was the least we could do to repay your kindness." As the evening wore on, Hank produced a fiddle and played carols while Rosa served hot cider and Christmas cake. For a few hours, the ranch house felt like the home it had once been, filled with laughter and warmth. When the ranch hands departed for their quarters and Rosa retired to her room, Elijah walked the women back to their cabin, carrying Miguel carefully wrapped against the cold. Sophia and Lillian went inside with the baby, but Abigail lingered on the porch with Elijah. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "It's been a long time since any of us felt part of a proper Christmas." "It's been a long time since this house felt like a home," he replied honestly. "Having you all here has changed things for the better." Abigail glanced up, noticing a sprig of mistletoe hanging from the porch beam. "Rosa's doing, no doubt." Elijah followed her gaze and smiled. "Rosa's quite the traditionalist," he said. Abigail felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Indeed." For a moment neither moved. Then, with gentle hesitation, Elijah leaned forward and placed a chaste kiss on her cheek. "Merry Christmas, Abigail Cooper." "Merry Christmas, Elijah Holbrook," she whispered back. January arrived with bitter cold and heavy snow that isolated the ranch for days at a time. Sophia recovered her strength, doting on baby Miguel, who grew stronger each day. Mrs. Blackwell visited when weather permitted, pronouncing both mother and child in excellent health. Lillian's time came next, in the second week of January. Unlike Sophia's relatively straightforward birth, hers was long and difficult. For nearly 20 hours she labored with Abigail, Sophia, and Mrs. Blackwell taking turns supporting her. Elijah remained close by, ensuring the cabin stayed warm, bringing food and fresh water, and praying silently that history would not repeat itself with another death in childbirth on his property. Finally, as dawn broke on a clear, frigid morning, Lillian's daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that everyone on the ranch could hear. Elijah, who had fallen asleep in a chair by the cabin door, startled awake at the sound. Mrs. Blackwell emerged, looking tired but satisfied. "Mother and daughter doing fine," she reported. "Another fighter you've got here, Mr. Holbrook." "Not mine," he corrected gently, "but I'm mighty glad to hear they're well." Lillian named her daughter Grace, saying she represented God's grace in her life after so much hardship. Like Sophia, she too was recovering well, marveling at her daughter's tiny fingers and the wisp of blonde hair that matched her own. As January turned to February, Abigail's time grew near. Her friendship with Elijah had deepened through the winter months, evolving into something neither spoke about directly, but both felt intensely. They spent evenings by the fire discussing books or playing chess, and during the day, Abigail continued managing the ranch's business affairs with increasing authority. One evening, as they sat in comfortable silence in his study, Elijah broached a subject that had been on his mind. "Have you thought about what comes next?" he asked. "After your baby arrives," Abigail set aside her mending. "We've discussed it, yes. The original plan to continue to California seems less certain now." "You could stay," he said, the words coming out more abruptly than he'd intended. "All of you. The cabin could be expanded. There's plenty of work here and the children could grow up with space and fresh air." "That's very generous, but it's not generosity," he interrupted. "The ranch has prospered more in these months with your management than in the previous 2 years. You've all made yourselves invaluable, and he hesitated. "I've grown accustomed to having you here." Abigail studied his face, seeing the emotion he was struggling to express. "I've grown accustomed to being here," she admitted softly, "but our situation remains complicated. 3 unmarried women with children, it would cause talk, even in a place as remote as this." "People will talk regardless," Elijah said with a dismissive wave. "What matters is what's right for you, for the children." The conversation was interrupted by a sharp intake of breath from Abigail, followed by a spreading dampness on her dress. "Elijah," she said calmly, though her eyes betrayed her fear, "I think you should fetch Mrs. Blackwell." Abigail's labor progressed quickly compared to her friends. By midnight, she was fully dilated, and Mrs. Blackwell predicted the baby would arrive before dawn. Unlike the previous births, however, complications arose as morning approached. The baby was positioned poorly, and Abigail's strength was flagging after hours of intense contractions. Outside the cabin, Elijah paced in the pre-dawn darkness, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. The memory of Sarah's death loomed large in his mind, and he found himself praying fervently for the first time in years. Inside, Sophia and Lillian supported their friend while Mrs. Blackwell worked to turn the baby. Abigail, exhausted and in terrible pain, clung to consciousness through sheer determination. "I need to push," she gasped during a brief respite between contractions. "Not yet," Mrs. Blackwell instructed firmly. "The baby's shoulder is stuck. If you push now, you could both be in danger." Another contraction seized her, and Abigail cried out, the sound piercing Elijah to his core. Unable to bear it any longer, he burst into the cabin. "What's happening?" he demanded. Is she, Mr. Holbrook, you need to leave, Mrs. Blackwell said sharply. This is no place for a man, but Abigail's eyes found his across the room. Elijah, she called weakly, stay, please. Against all propriety, he moved to her side, taking her hand. I'm here, he said. You're the strongest woman I know, Abigail Cooper, you can do this. His presence seemed to give her renewed strength. When Mrs. Blackwell finally determined the baby had shifted position enough, Abigail pushed with everything she had left. 3 massive efforts later, her son was born, small but with a powerful set of lungs that announced his arrival to the world. He's perfect, Mrs. Blackwell declared after examining him. A fighter like his mother. Tears streaming down her face, Abigail held her son for the first time. Through her exhaustion, she looked up at Elijah. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Elijah, overcome with emotion, could only nod, his throat too tight for words. The sun was rising outside, casting golden light through the cabin windows, illuminating the new mother and child in a way that seemed almost divine to his eyes. In that moment, watching Abigail with her son, Elijah knew with absolute certainty that he had fallen in love with her. The realization didn't shock him, it felt more like accepting a truth that had been present for months. As February turned to March, and the first signs of spring began to appear on the ranch, Elijah threw himself into expanding the cabin. With help from his ranch hands, he added 2 more bedrooms and enlarged the main living area, creating a proper home for the women and their children. Abigail named her son Thomas, after her grandfather, the only family member who had shown her kindness after her disgrace. The 3 new mothers established a rhythm, supporting each other through the challenges of caring for newborns while continuing to contribute to the ranch's operations. One warm evening in late March, Elijah invited Abigail to walk with him to the ridge overlooking the property. Thomas, now a month old, was being watched by Sophia and Lillian, giving Abigail a rare moment of freedom. As they reached the viewpoint, the ranch spread out below them, bathed in the golden light of sunset. The main house, the expanded cabin, the barn and corrals, all of it looked peaceful and prosperous. I've been thinking, Elijah said, breaking the comfortable silence between them, about what you said regarding your situation, 3 unmarried women with children causing talk. It's already happening in town, Abigail acknowledged. Mrs. Blackwell mentioned that there's been gossip since she attended our births. I expected as much, he said. Which is why I have a proposal not just for you, but for Sophia and Lillian as well, if they're amenable. Abigail looked at him curiously. What kind of proposal? I own 300 acres here, with grazing rights to another 1,000. It's too much for one man to oversee properly. I'm thinking of dividing some of it, creating 3 smaller homesteads around the main ranch. Homesteads, Elijah nodded. Each with its own house and garden plot, but sharing the advantages of the larger operation. Sophia has shown remarkable talent with the accounts, and Lillian's plans for the gardens and orchards could transform the eastern section of the property. And me? Abigail asked quietly. Elijah turned to face her fully. You, Abigail Cooper, have become essential to everything here, including me. He took a deep breath. I'm not offering you a homestead. I'm offering you a partnership in every sense of the word if you'll have it. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Elijah, are you? Asking you to marry me? Yes, I believe I am. He took her hands in his. I've loved you for months now, your strength, your intelligence, your compassion. I love Thomas as if he were my own, and I want to build a life with you both if you'll allow it. Abigail's eyes filled with tears. What about my past? The circumstances of Thomas's birth? The past is past, Elijah said firmly. Thomas is your son, our son, if you'll share him with me. The only future I'm concerned with is the one we might create together." For a long moment, Abigail was silent, tears spilling onto her cheeks. Then, slowly, a smile transformed her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Elijah Holbrook." Their kiss was tender, a promise of the life they would build together. As they walked back to the ranch hand in hand, Abigail thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain and rejection that had led, somehow, to this unexpected happiness. The following day, Elijah presented his homestead proposal to Sophia and Lillian. Both women were overwhelmed by his generosity and the opportunity for true independence it represented. "But what will people say?" Lillian worried. "Two unmarried women with children, owning property. Let them talk," Elijah said dismissively. "The land will be yours, legally and properly. I've already spoken with Judge Patterson in Red Valley about drawing up the deeds." Sophia, always practical, asked about the terms. "No terms," Elijah assured her. "The land is a gift in recognition of what you've both contributed to the ranch's success. Of course, I hope you'll continue to work with us, combining our efforts for the benefit of all three properties, but that would be a business arrangement, separate from the land ownership." After much discussion, both women accepted, recognizing the extraordinary opportunity being offered. Construction on their houses would begin as soon as the spring mud dried enough for foundations to be laid. Elijah and Abigail were married in April, in a small ceremony at the ranch attended by the ranch hands, Rosa, Sophia and Lillian with their children, and a few trusted friends from town, including Judge Patterson, who performed the ceremony, and Mrs. Blackwell, who had become a dear friend to all three women. As spring turned to summer, the ranch transformed. Lillian's gardens flourished, providing fresh produce for all three households. Sophia's careful management of the ranch's finances led to the purchase of additional cattle and improved breeding stock. The houses for both women were completed by July, modest but well-built structures that gave each family their own space while keeping them close to the main ranch. The community's initial gossip about the unusual arrangement gradually gave way to respect as the combined operation prospered. Judge Patterson's public support and Elijah's standing in the territory helped smooth the way for acceptance, and the women's dignified behavior and hard work did the rest. In August, an unexpected visitor arrived at the ranch, a distinguished-looking older couple in an expensive carriage, inquiring after Abigail Cooper. They were her parents, who had tracked her down after receiving a letter she had sent informing them of her marriage. The reunion was initially tense. Mr. and Mrs. Cooper had come to persuade their daughter to return east, having decided that a discreet marriage to a respectable widower was preferable to ongoing estrangement. They were taken aback to discover she had already married a rancher and had no intention of leaving Colorado. "This is my home now," Abigail told them firmly as they sat in the parlor of the main house. "Elijah is my husband, Thomas is our son, and this ranch is where we're building our future." Mrs. Cooper looked around the comfortable but decidedly rustic home with poorly disguised dismay. "But surely you can't mean to raise a child in such primitive conditions?" Elijah, who had been silent until then, spoke up. "Madam, with all due respect, there's nothing primitive about a home filled with love and honesty. Your grandson will grow up knowing his worth isn't measured by social standing, but by his character." Mr. Cooper bristled. "Young man, you don't understand the considerations of proper society. I understand that proper society cast out your daughter when she needed support the most," Elijah interrupted, his voice level but firm. "And now that she's found happiness without your help, you want to reclaim her. That's not how it works out here." Abigail placed a calming hand on Elijah's arm before addressing her parents. "Mother, Father, I'd like you to know your grandson. I'd like him to know his grandparents, but it will be on our terms with respect for the life we've built here." After several days of sometimes difficult conversations, a tentative peace was established. The Coopers, seeing their daughter's determination and the undeniable love between her and Elijah, gradually accepted the situation. Before departing, they promised to return the following summer for a longer visit, perhaps bringing Abigail's younger sister, who had expressed curiosity about the West. As autumn painted the landscape with gold and crimson, Sophia received unexpected news of her own. Miguel's father, a young businessman in Santa Fe whom she had believed wanted nothing to do with her or the baby, had been searching for her. Having finally learned her whereabouts, he arrived at the ranch one October afternoon, hat in hand and contrition in his eyes. His name was David Reynolds, and unlike the men who had abandoned Abigail and Lillian, he claimed his disappearance had been a misunderstanding. He had been called suddenly to Boston on family business, returning to find Sophia gone, with rumors that she'd been sent away in disgrace. "I've spent months searching for you," he told her as they walked along the creek that bordered her new property. To explain to make things right. Sophia, wary but still harboring feelings for him, listened to his story. "And now that you've found us. Now I want to be a father to my son," David said simply, "and a husband to you if you'll have me." Unlike Abigail's whirlwind romance with Elijah, Sophia proceeded cautiously. David remained in the area, taking a room in Red Valley and visiting the ranch daily to spend time with Miguel and court Sophia properly. By Christmas, she had accepted his proposal, with the wedding planned for the following spring. Lillian's path was different. Having been deeply betrayed by Grace's father, she expressed no interest in romance, focusing instead on creating a secure home for her daughter and developing her talents as a horticulturist. Under her care, the gardens expanded to include medicinal herbs and flowers, and she began experimenting with new varieties of fruits and vegetables suited to Colorado's climate. "Not all happiness requires a husband," she told Abigail one day as they watched their children playing together on a blanket in the shade of a cottonwood tree. "You and Sophia found good men who value you. I found independence and purpose. Both are valid paths." Abigail agreed, respecting her friend's choice and admiring her strength. The three women remained as close as sisters, their children growing up together as one extended family united by the bonds formed during that fateful winter. As 1879 drew to a close and a new decade beckoned, Elijah stood on the porch of the main house on New Year's Eve, watching the celebration unfolding in the yard. Lanterns hung from tree branches, casting a warm glow over the gathered community, the ranch hands and their families, neighbors from nearby properties, Rosa supervising the food tables, Sophia and David dancing by the bonfire, Lillian showing Grace the stars overhead. Abigail joined him, little Thomas asleep against her shoulder. "Quite the gathering," she remarked, leaning into her husband's embrace. "A far cry from last New Year's when you were alone out here." "The best kind of change," he replied, kissing her temple. "I never imagined when I saw three stranded women at that train station that my life was about to transform completely." "Nor did we," Abigail said softly. "We were so frightened, so desperate, and now look at us landowners, businesswomen, mothers." "And in your case, a wife," Elijah added with a smile. "The finest partner a man could ask for." Abigail shifted Thomas to her other shoulder, a slight grimace crossing her face as she adjusted her stance. "Are you well?" Elijah asked, immediately concerned. "Perfectly well," she assured him. Though Dr. Miller confirmed yesterday what I've suspected for a few weeks now, it seems Thomas will have a brother or sister by next summer. Joy spread across Elijah's face. Truly? Abigail nodded, her eyes shining with happiness. Truly, our family is growing again. As midnight approached, the entire community gathered around the bonfire. Hank played his fiddle while others sang, their voices rising into the clear, star-filled Colorado sky. Elijah looked around at the scene, at the three houses visible in the moonlight, at the women who had arrived with nothing and built new lives through courage and determination, at his wife and son, and the new life growing within her. What had begun as a simple act of decency, offering shelter to three pregnant women abandoned at a train station, had blossomed into something extraordinary. A community, a family, a future none of them could have imagined that autumn day in 1878. As the new year dawned, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings and continued growth, Elijah knew with absolute certainty that the best decision of his life had been stopping at that station, tipping his hat to three desperate women, and offering them not just a home on his land, but a chance to create something lasting and beautiful together. Abigail squeezed his hand as if reading his thoughts. "Happy New Year, husband," she whispered. "Happy New Year, wife," he replied, his heart full to bursting. "The first of many." And in the years that followed, the three homes on Elijah Holbrook's land became legendary in the territory, a place where the unexpected family they had formed continued to grow and flourish, where children ran free between the properties, where gardens bloomed and cattle grazed on the hills, and where three women who had once been abandoned and alone found not just shelter, but love, purpose, and belonging that would last all their days. Spring of 1885 found the Holbrook Ranch hosting its annual May Day celebration, a tradition that had grown with each passing year. What had started as a small gathering of three households had evolved into one of the most anticipated social events in the county, drawing families from as far away as Denver. Under a brilliant blue Colorado sky, tables laden with food stretched alongside the creek where white canvas tents provided shade for the elderly and nursing mothers. Children raced across meadows dotted with early wildflowers, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Men gathered near the newly constructed dance platform, where musicians tuned their instruments for the evening's festivities. At the center of it all stood Abigail Holbrook, now 33, and in her 7th year of marriage to Elijah. With one hand she shaded her eyes, watching her 6-year-old son Thomas lead his 3-year-old sister Catherine in a game of tag with the other children. Her youngest, 1-year-old James, was balanced on her hip, his father's blue eyes taking in the colorful scene with wonder. "Abigail," called Sophia Reynolds, approaching with a basket of fresh-cut flowers. At 35, Sophia had blossomed into a confident, radiant woman, her marriage to David having proven happier than she dared hope. "Where shall we put these for the maypole?" "By the musician's platform," Abigail replied. Lillian's already started weaving the ribbons. Together they walked toward the platform where Lillian Gardner supervised a group of young girls preparing the maypole. At 30, Lillian remained unmarried by choice, though not for lack of suitors. Her homestead had evolved into a prosperous nursery business, supplying seedlings and grafted fruit trees to homesteaders across the territory. 6-year-old Grace, the spitting image of her mother with the same blonde curls and determined chin, worked alongside the older girls, her small fingers deftly handling colorful ribbons. "It's going to be our best celebration yet," Lillian declared as her friends approached. "Judge Patterson just arrived with his wife, and I heard the new school teacher from Red Valley is coming with that handsome doctor who took over for Dr. Miller." Lillian Gardner, Sophia teased. "Are you finally showing interest in a gentleman caller?" Lillian laughed, shaking her head. "I was thinking of Rosa's niece who's staying with us for the summer. The girl can't stop talking about him." "Speaking of Rosa," Abigail said, "has anyone seen her? The roast pigs should be ready for carving soon." "Last I saw, she was instructing the ranch hands on the proper way to serve her special punch," Lillian replied. 20 years in this country and she still insists no American can properly make sangria." The three women shared a laugh, their bond as strong as ever despite the changes in their lives. Together, they had weathered challenges, celebrated triumphs, and built a unique community that defied convention while commanding respect. Across the meadow, Elijah Holbrook watched his wife with their youngest son, a surge of love washing over him that was as powerful now as it had been when he first realized his feelings for her 6 years earlier. At 38, he had achieved more happiness than he'd ever thought possible after losing his first wife. The ranch had expanded to become one of the most successful operations in the state, and his family, both blood and chosen, had flourished around him. He was pulled from his contemplation by David Reynolds, who approached leading their horses. At 37, David had proven himself a devoted husband to Sophia and father to their children Miguel, now 6, and twin daughters Clara and Alina, aged 4. "Everything's set at the North Pasture," David reported. The new Herefords arrived in good condition. The men had become not just neighbors but true partners and friends, combining their talents to expand the ranch's operations. David's business acumen and Eastern connections had opened new markets for their cattle, while Elijah's lifelong knowledge of ranching ensured the quality of their stock remained unmatched. "Good timing," Elijah replied. "Those government contracts Abigail secured for the army posts will need filling by August." "She's remarkable," David said, nodding toward where the women stood by the maypole. "They all are. Sometimes I still can't believe how things turned out." "Divine providence," suggested Hank, Elijah's longtime foreman, joining the conversation. Now in his 60s with hair gone completely gray, he remained an essential part of ranch operations and had become something of an honorary grandfather to all the children. "The good Lord put you in that station at the right moment, boss." Elijah smiled, remembering that autumn evening that had changed everything. "Lucky for me he did." The celebration continued as afternoon mellowed toward evening. Tables were cleared and reset for the main meal, while Judge Patterson, now serving his 3rd term, made a speech praising the contributions the three families had made to the county's prosperity. The new schoolhouse in Red Valley had been largely funded by donations from the Holbrook Ranch, while Lillian's agricultural innovations had improved crop yields throughout the region. Sophia and David's investment in the railroad spur connecting Red Valley to the main line had transformed the local economy. After the meal, as musicians struck up lively tunes and couples began to dance, Abigail found a quiet moment with her husband beneath the cottonwood trees that had grown tall along the creek bank. "Happy?" Elijah asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "Completely," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I was thinking about how different things might have been if you hadn't stopped that day at the station." "I've thought about that too," he admitted. "What made me notice you three specifically when I'd ridden past that station hundreds of times before without stopping." "And what was your conclusion?" Elijah smiled down at her. "That some things are meant to be, even if we don't understand why or how they come about." Abigail nodded, watching as Thomas ran past chasing his cousins. "I think you're right. All the pain, all the rejection that brought us here, it led to something beautiful." From the edge of the celebration, Lillian called out that it was time for the maypole dance. Children gathered excitedly while adults formed a wider circle around them. "We should join them," Abigail said. As they walked hand in hand toward the gathering, Elijah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 3 desperate women, abandoned and vulnerable. A split-second decision to offer help. The gradual building of trust, then friendship, then love. The creation of homes and families and a future none of them could have imagined. The maypole dance began, children weaving ribbons in intricate patterns while adults clapped in time with the music. Watching his extended family, the children, the women who had become the heart of this community, the men who worked alongside him, Elijah felt a profound sense of gratitude. What had started with a simple offer of shelter had grown into a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. A legacy of compassion, of second chances, of creating family from the unlikeliest beginnings. As twilight deepened into dusk and lanterns were lit around the celebration, Elijah pulled Abigail close for a dance. Across the platform, Sophia and David swayed to the same melody, while Lillian twirled her daughter between them, laughing at the child's exuberance. "I love you, Mrs. Holbrook," Elijah murmured against Abigail's hair. "And I love you, Mr. Holbrook," she replied, lifting her face for his kiss. "Today and all days." The music played on as stars appeared overhead, illuminating the homes they had built, the lives they had saved, and the love that had transformed 3 abandoned women and 1 compassionate cowboy into a family, bound by something stronger than blood, the choice to see the best in each other, to offer second chances, and to create something enduring from what others might have discarded. And as the celebration continued into the night, their story, which had begun with desperation at a lonely train station, continued to unfold in countless new beginnings, each one a testament to the power of kindness and the enduring strength of love freely given and gratefully received.